I know we're late, but there's a reason it's called Monday. It's because it's Moan's Day. Do we really have to come away from the weekend back into the workaday world and all the things that it requires? I hope you had a good weekend. Me, I slept. I slept like a log that had been sawed, chopped down, trampled by little people, run through the sawdust machine, and lo and behold, on Monday I've been remade. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just a piece of plywood, but I'm solid enough to get through the week. Welcome back, and welcome to our new listeners. We were on Laid Back Law with Eric Huntley last week, and he did us a solid of boosting us, and now we've made it over 1,000 subscriptions on YouTube, which Mike tells me means that we are able to start monetizing this and perhaps achieve a dream. Like Martin Luther King, I have a dream, and that is one day to be able to talk about the law without being screamed at by clients who are in need. The lawyers have a saying, this is why they become judges. Law would be great if it weren't for the clients. But let's be real. What is law? And what is Law and Legitimacy, the podcast? Because we may have hundreds of new listeners today, let me reintroduce the concept of law and legitimacy to you. Behold the world. It is what it is. And we've used this metaphor before. You're coming down via satellite and you see this round orb in the sky. The closer you get, you see geographic features. The closer you get, you see these hums of activity, these hives of activity. And there are discernible hives, different groups of people constellated together along differing dimensions. And those become societies. And those societies are infused with a sense of history and a sense of culture. And what defines a society is a certain sense of self, an orientation toward being in the world, an orientation toward the world itself. The result is that we end up with different civilizations and different ways of being in the world. In Law and Legitimacy, our task is to discover what it is that creates a sense of legitimacy in our world, the United States in particular. That's where we live. We're not here to offer solutions to street sweeping in Bangladesh. I've never been to Bangladesh, and odds are I'll never go. I live and spend most of my time in New Haven, Connecticut. Mike lives and spends most of his time in North Carolina. I spend as much time as I can in Vermont and pop around the country doing one thing or another, and I see what I see. And what I see is a nation increasingly divided. What I see is a people lost. What I see is a culture that seems to have lost its moorings. And so to give you a prism through which to view law and legitimacy and what we're doing here, think of the following. I want to distinguish between power and authority. Power means submitting to someone out of fear. Authority means submitting in part out of fear, but out of respect. Authority is power plus something, and that something is legitimacy. Example: you're standing at a street corner at the street light, and a man comes up to you in normal clothing, puts a gun to your back, and says, "Give me your wallet." Odds are, unless you're a Krav Maga guy or you've got some superior self-defense skill, odds are you'll give the wallet up, and you'll give the wallet up not because you think it's the right thing to do, but you're succumbing to a show of force, and so fear yields you to give the wallet. That's power. Now let's change the hypothetical somewhat. Same street corner, same touch of a gun in your back, and you turn and you see a man in the badge and indicia of a police uniform. It's got your local town over his shoulder. You see his name, his name across the nameplate. He says, "I'm with the police. Show me your wallet." You give him the wallet. Now you're still afraid, and realistically, police procedure most likely wouldn't permit an officer to poke the gun in the back, but it's a hypothetical. I get to change the facts to suit my purposes. Those of you who've gone to law school know the great teaching example of hypothetical examples. You make up a fanciful world to illustrate a point. And my point is that the ability to use force on behalf of the public good, that is legitimacy. And we have there are a number of ways of acquiring a sense of legitimacy. The German sociologist Max Weber once wrote that there are basically three forms of legitimacy, three things to explain the state's monopoly on the use of force. There is traditional forms of legitimacy. Power has been passed from father to son, from generation to generation, for time immemorial. There is charismatic legitimacy. A person has been touched with a gift of charisma, the gift of the gods, and that charisma infuses them with a sense that infuses people with a sense that this is right. It's not just power, but it's rightfully used. In the United States, we have, and in Western democratic societies, we are now and have for centuries been in a regime where power is passed by rules, by means of rational means, by rule bound means, the rule of law. And so in the West, we have a powerful tradition that reaches back centuries where we've tried to justify this rational transfer of power and we look at the profound reaction to the events of January 6th, which continue in 2021, where when there was a riot at the Capitol, which, depending on your political perspective, was either an expression of popular frustration or an attempt to undermine the very foundations of democracy. And my mocking tone tells you where I am on that. The cornerstone of a sense of legitimacy is best expressed, in my view, by a throwaway or cast aside remark that Cicero made in an essay he wrote several millennia ago. A commonwealth isn't just any collection, or republic, res publica, public thing, constitution. It isn't just any collection of men. It's a collection of men gathered together by a common conception of right and common interests. So we all have common interests in the United States. We want the ability to purchase safe and nourishing food. We want the ability to move about freely on the streets and to not be abducted by the strangers I talked about. We want secure and safe commercial transactions. We want a clean environment. We have common interests. We want to feel significant in our own communities and feel that we have efficacy and the ability to thrive as human beings with others in the locations in which we live. Those are common interests. But do we any longer share a common conception of right? And one of the things that Mike and I have become persuaded of in the 3 years that we've been doing this podcast, it'll be 3 years this month if it's not already, is that we've lost a common sense of legitimacy, that the narratives we tell, the stories we tell, the ideas we share about our lives together don't match. And the result is that we live in a world of warring ideologies. And my sense is that this has become almost psychotic in its proportion. And let me tell you why. I was at a family event at a friend's house the other day. I'm staying with some friends while, my life is upended for a series of reasons that happen along life's way. And so his brother came by, and his brother is a dedicated Fox News guy. And, hey, I've got a solution to the border crisis. Oh, yeah. What is that? Torch those people. And I said, what are you talking about? Just electrocute them. Let's electrify the Rio Grande. They step in there and they're done. And I said, well, that would do it, but do you mean, yeah, but do you mean that? Of course I do. And I said, well, what if it were your daughter or your child that stepped into the river in search of nothing so much as a better life? How would you feel then? And, he didn't pause, but I know him to be a warm human being who, has plenty to say on the topic of race, but has a biracial daughter whom he adores and spends all the time he can in the world with her. And the reason is that he has a common interest. He has love for her. He has regard for her. And the ideas that come out of his mouth aren't consistent with the life he lives. And my sense is that so much of what's going on in our politics is like that right now. And we've lost the ability to calibrate how it is that we experience ourselves in the world with the world in which we live. And that represents, ladies and gentlemen, a crisis. And so in Law and Legitimacy, we look for opportunities to talk about this as much as we can. We try to foster a civil sense of communicative response to the world, where we try to create a safe space for reason, or at least for rationality, understanding fully that the world is composed of unseen forces. And you're like, wait, is Norm going Shirley MacLaine on me? No, but let's be real. A good friend of mine announced the other day they'll be celebrating their 36th anniversary of sobriety under AA, and I just could not be more proud of this person, because what this person did was come to the end of themselves and understand that there is an unseen world. And you're like, huh? Think about it for a minute. Think about the origin of space and time. The Genesis myth is that God created the universe out of nothing, that at one moment there was nothing and then there was something, and that something became the universe we inhabit. quite frankly, that is your experience in the world. You weren't, and then you were suddenly, and you became an accumulation of drives, instincts, passions, and the environment around you. And along the way, as people evolve out of their beginning, they go in a variety of different directions. And sometimes people they come to love the wrong thing. That's what Augustine calls sin, love of the wrong thing. And in seeking to fill that hunger, in seeking to arrive at a sense of openness to the world around them, some people drink. Some people drink as a way of dulling the pain of being in the world, because they'd rather have the concrete expression of something rather than the experience of being a plaything of the gods, open in the wind, as it were, in the universe at large. And so a person who has gone through the AA 12, and it's the only real what do you call it, effective means I've read for dealing with alcoholism. What does it come down to? It comes to an acknowledgement of a higher power. It comes to an acknowledgement that we live in a world that we didn't create, and it is our responsibility to being open to that world and going to where that world takes us. And so, in Western civilization, we have a set of institutions. In the United States, we have a set of institutions, the Constitution, we talk endlessly about it here, that seek to create the outer limits of how we experience ourselves as a community. We wonder here at Law and Legitimacy whether things have reached a breaking point, whether the commitment to liberal democracy and pluralism has run its course, and whether the bottom, we'll say here, has fallen out of pluralism. That is, when we used to cherish diversity as a number of means to excellence, that was okay as long as we had some implicit understanding of what excellence was. But when diversity became an end in itself, without a commitment to a common conception of excellence, did the world become a freak show? Are we arguing about who gets to compete in what form and what kind of body and what athletic event, or who gets to pee in which bathroom? Because we've lost our bearings. And so I've got a joke. Who here knows the word micturition? And I'm not talking about Mick Turation, the star of the CBS hit series, Irishmen Go Blind. No, I'm talking about peeing, urination. Micturition is urination. So I was with a bunch of people at a casino last week performing some stand-up comedy because, yes, I'm trying to break out. And I said, who here pees outside the door at their house when they get home? And people looked at me. And I said, for the last 20 years, each and every house I've lived in, and, I now own 3 of them. We'll see how long that lasts. It's possible for me to get out of the car in the evening and pee outside. And somebody said, that's white privilege. So I want you to go out today into the world and ask people if they know that micturition possesses white privilege. When micturition pees outside, you're doing that because your neighbors can't see you. Most folks can't afford to live that way. So this is a taste. Those of you who are new, this is Law and Legitimacy. This is our perspective. We are seeking to discover within the West, within the United States, commitments to common norms and values such that we can accomplish the goal of human flourishing together in communities. I submit to you that project is desperately needed right now. And it is very much an open question whether we can accomplish it.
And the way that we do that, Norm, is through any illustration we can look at in the media that is garnering widespread public attention, right? And so the vectors are what? The application of our criminal justice system, principally right now through the likes of Donald Trump, right? And what we would consider to be the politically motivated apparatus that is seeking his prosecution along several fronts. We do that through economics, whether that be through BlackRock's interests in stakeholder capitalism and that sort of thing, or whether that's through decentralized digital assets and cryptocurrency. We've talked with Jimmy Valley several times about XRP and Ripple on this stream. We also do it through popular culture. And a number of other things that we see out in the world that give us an opportunity to talk about that absence of good faith that is required for that sort of collectivized sense of commitment to the institutions that ultimately exist by and through that paper that we call the Constitution and the several amendments flowing therefrom, right? These things that we would agree are germane to the well-functioning of our republic, but we are recognizing right now that requires something extra in order to preserve and to grow. And when you talk about the bottom falling from pluralism, Norm, to me that translates to there is an absence of good faith. There is a widespread mistrust, at least to a level that now makes it apparent that this system, as well designed as it may be on paper, requires people to act in good faith and trust each other in order for our more perfect union.
Well, something, so let's get to it. So that's the introduction. Let's apply it. Fascinating story last week. Deeply, deeply disturbing. I hadn't followed it before. The so-called mommy blogger case,
Mhm.
relating to Ruby Franke. A mommy blogger is somebody who blogs online about their experience as a parent, and there really is nothing as profound as the love of a parent. I have 3 children. I'll let their names remain anonymous here for the sake of your dad said what, that frickin' wackadoodle, no, I mean, can you get, but I will never forget holding my first child. It was maybe the most profound, other than finding love in the eyes and arms of a stranger. It was right up there, maybe more profound, as profound an experience as any I've had, because suddenly this screaming bundle of flesh is placed into my arms, and I held him, and something was drawn from me. And it was overwhelming. I just let it flow, and that was the attachment that I formed to this little boy, some 41 years ago, and it changed my life. And so we have children, and they become part of us. They are us. We are in them. They are in us, and off they go into the world. And our job as parents is to transform these little bundles of flesh, which have all the potential for human flourishing, into something that can flourish and go on and do its own bit of business in the world. And that's parenthood, and it's tough work. Um, um, in the and so a mommy blogger presumably is a person who writes about that in their own unique, inimitable way, and others read it because they recognize themselves in the words of the other. In this case, Ruby Frank, I don't know what happened. At one point she's the happy mother of 8 with her husband, and she's posing in pictures looking as prim and proper as a rose in a vase in a museum. And the next minute, she's fallen under the sway of this controversial, she's described as a mental health coach, Jody Hildebrand. And before you know it, Hildebrand and Ruby are living together, and the children suddenly become obstacles to what they share. And the children are horribly abused. And so this natural love that the mother had for the children got diverted into something else. And that something else permitted her to whip her children, to keep them outside, to keep them in duct tape, to starve them, and to place them in horribly abusive conditions. Anybody out there who has ability to get us court documents on that, we want them. I want to read the sentencing documents. I want to read whatever mental health studies were done of Ruby Franke to figure out how she was transformed, presumably from a woman who was transformed by the love of her child into someone who became a monster and who turned on her children and regarded her children as obstacles to her. I mean, if you want, I'm always reluctant to use the word evil, because does evil exist in the world, or is evil simply an absence of good? And I'm going to take the position that evil is the absence of good, and that sin is always love of the wrong thing. So what switch got flicked in Ruby Franke such that she became a rage-filled mother who viewed her children as obstacles to what she needed? What role did her relationship with Hildebrand have in that? Who is Hildebrand? And what kind of chemistry possessed them such that this mother could turn on her child and treat the child worse than we would ever permit an animal to be treated? Um, this case fills me with terror, because my hunch is that these people, I mean, I can't remember who it was that said, let nothing human be foreign to us. My view is that there's a criminal within the heart of each of us, and that but for discipline, acts of grace, we're all capable of the worst that any one of us does. And the fact that this woman Ruby Franke could do this to her own children. Mike, it just blows me away. And I mean, there's a dark quality to it. I'll call it the roadkill phenomena. I need to know what happened here, so that I can work to create a world in which it doesn't happen again. And I can also look within my own soul and say, upon inspection, I see the roots of every sin, and there, but for the grace of God, go I, because I do think that, much like an alcoholic in its dedication to the his or her dedication to the bottle and what the bottle blunts, Ruby Frank permitted something to be blunted in her psyche and soul, and there's a moral for that in all of us, and that is that we need to be open to the fact that we are but spots in a larger universe, and we need to approach the universe and the world with open arms and with the eyes of faith, because there are unseen forces in the world. We're each the creation of them.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find words. I put this picture on the screen because I think when I was reading this article, Norm, this is what struck me the most. The article does reference that her divorce was in 2022, and then you've got this photo, which beautiful kids, beautiful family by all objective measures. And the facts of the case that we're discussing now are such they stand in such stark contrast to what we would assume that this photo says about the relationship between all of the people in this photo, this family, the man, the woman, and their children. I also find that as I'm reading this, that not enough, in my opinion, is focused on the therapist. What is it, Jody Hildebrandt? I think,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I want to acknowledge Junior Coltrane. He had a really good comment earlier. I wasn't ripe yet, Junior, so forgive me for not uh, giving you your shine before now. But he said this when we were talking about legitimacy, the notion of legitimacy, and the bottom falling from pluralism. He said the government has become a real Jody Hildebrandt, meaning that Jody Hildebrandt is the producer of the show, the mental health coach that ushered this in, right? And oversaw essentially the abuse of the children.
But
Although,
what went wrong? Because, there's a darkness within us all. I mean, those of you who are regular listeners of the show know that I put the psycho in psychoanalysis, 4 days a week, 7 o'clock, 17 years I've been going to a psychoanalyst trying to figure out what makes me tick, because I'm exposed to so much that's raw and horrible. In my law practice, is primarily criminal law, and so I am seeing the darkness within each day as I go to court and try to be an instrument of grace and a vehicle of transition for my clients from where they are to where they're going as the society or the state seeks to move their cases along. I don't think I've ever had a case. Well, I guess I probably have, but these allegations, they're just breathtaking to me. What broke and why? Again, if you're out there and you're in the community, I don't remember where this took place, Mike, but you have access to court documents. Shoot us an email, give us your coordinates, and we'll pay for the postage. I want court documents on this case. I need to know what happened here, what went wrong, what darkness within was permitted to blossom such that these women became monsters and broke the bond and transformed transformed the natural love of a parent for child into something like hatred.
yeah, I think that something that I've almost unwittingly at this point, but I've been speaking about it in terms of en masse, the type of hell, the type of despair that humans are capable of creating for themselves, the types of evil that we're capable of bringing about. And I think in individual circumstances, this is a prime example of that. But I think that what's particularly terrifying to me as a dad, right, is just the notion that something could break so fundamentally, and that children could be treated this way. Children could be the objects of some sort of projection of evil, right, and then abused. Therefore, and I agree. I wanna know more. Junior says that, she cleaned out the bank accounts, her kids' bank accounts, and wanted her, I guess, husband, Kevin, to sign the house over. She was in the middle of totally robbing her husband of everything. Um, there's more here that we need to dive into, Norm, but
Yeah,
this
let's get to it. Let's go. Let's, folks. Thanks. I see. Psychologist Carolyn Borsenko, PhD, has covered the mental health field. I don't know what that means. Presumably, all psychologists do that, and warns of its danger. Janet, what's the danger? Send us a note. I'm not saying I won't
Oh,
read
I
the
think
book.
I understand what Janet's getting at. Every podcast I listen to right now is talking about getting a subscription to BetterHelp. right? These sort of online therapy platforms, this growth of the field, the business, the commercialization, the scaling of this of the field of mental health and therapy to the retail consumer. Janet, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Certainly, do not want to. But if that's what you're referring to, I'm very interested in understanding.
Look, there are truths. There is something to the human condition. Some people have insight and a desire to share it, and we're all hungry for significance. So the notion that people are going to take that longing, and go to the wrong place, that's scary. But something broke here. Let's know more. Hey, big day for the Donald in Manhattan. What's going on with Quack Quack Man?
So two things are going on this morning. Number one, he'll appear.
I'm channeling my inner Donald.
He'll appear in the hush money case. I think the court is going to look to schedule the trial this morning. And then we're also still dealing with and we didn't really cover this at all. I think that there plenty of other platforms were covering the issue of the bond. We just referenced it sort of peripherally as we were covering other topics. But the bond issue is coming to bear, and ultimately, I think the deadline is coming up quite soon. And so now we are going to see if the state of New York is going to take measures to actually seize Trump's assets to secure the bond. Namely, I think they're talking about one of his golf courses in upstate New York is the first or the likely first property that it will look to seize.
A friend of mine, I was having coffee with a good friend of mine this morning, about 5:30. And you're like, what time do you get up in the morning? Well, before 5:30, such that I'm having coffee with a friend. And we were talking about Trump. And he said, have you seen his New York house? And I'm like, no. And he shows me a picture of it. And it really is a spectacular place. I mean, it looks like it's got 30, 40 rooms, And he said, that's just one of them. He doesn't spend any time there. And so, I don't understand the spirit of a man. I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. I've done well enough to thrive within the limited environments that my circumstances have provided. But the notion that there are these larger than life people inhabiting 60-room mansions, owning multiples of them, and having the staffs that it takes to support them. That's, I guess F. Scott Fitzgerald was right. The rich really are different. But Donald is a spirit unbound, unchained. And I don't know that Letitia James and her like are prepared to deal with the hot colds of Donald Trump. I don't know that the United States of America is. Donald is unbound. And we refer to him here as the canary in the coal mine. He's not somebody that in a political science 101 class in the year 2010, people would have recognized as a party insider capable of obtaining a party's nomination and winning the White House. But yet he became one of the most magnetic figures in American political life, and the authority that he brings, the sense of what he inspires among his his supporters, I think reflects charisma. Because what makes him a charismatic figure is that he's a canary in the coal mine. There's something broken in the country, and people gravitate to Donald not because they like him, not because they want to have dinner with him, not because they want him to grab his daughter's pussy and get away with it. You remember his lines back on the television show. But they gravitate toward him because he reflects the reality that they live. And the reality they live is we live in a broken society. And Donald isn't going to just sit back and going to take it. He reflects that. Now, he needs to do more. And we need to start living in a post-Donald universe. We need to focus on the coal mine. What am I referring to? In 2020, a wonderful book was written that was ignored, largely because of George Floyd, the pandemic, and the distraction that became 2020. And the book was by Angus Deaton and Ann Case, and it was called Deaths of Despair. In that book, they noted that there were deaths among white, middle-class, working-class people throughout the United States, and that as a result, this was helping to suppress average life expectancy in the United States. And upon further inspection, they found that these deaths were so-called deaths of despair, deaths incident to alcoholism, deaths incident to drug abuse, and then out-and-out direct suicides. And they raised the question, why is this happening? That's part of the coal mine we need to discuss. Now, in an era of identity politics, we don't talk about it because, hey, white people are expendable. Let them die, And then there's a lot of literature about, white rage and white lash, and the fact that the white extremism is a reflection of the fact that in a diverse society, power is spread more diffusely. Yeah, I'm open to all of those arguments. But I also know that if we're going to live in a world in which we have equal regard and respect for all, we need to do a better job of distributing power, resources, and a sense of significance than we're doing right now. So Donald remains the canary in the coal mine. I guess now today is Judgment Day, so to speak. He either puts up a bond for the judgment that New York State got against him in his real estate trial, or they begin to seize assets. It'll be interesting to see what happens next.
Yeah, well, I think that right now I'm struck by the notion that this sort of yes, okay, rich people are different. But when we talk about these sums of money, I think I'm struck by the fact that he's looking on the private market for a number of bond companies that may coordinate together to underwrite a bond on his behalf to this amount. I mean, we're talking about $500,000, Norm. But is it the case that the bond statutes were written such that this is an example that would have been upheld sort of from a legislative perspective? Was legislative intent is that being upheld in the case of Donald Trump, right? Where there's a certain percentage of the total judgment that needs to be put up pending the appeal. And so they considered that someone might actually have to put up $500 million in terms of a bond to secure the appeal rights. I don't think that that's the case, but I guess, maybe that's a little bit to the side.
Yeah, well, let's I mean, we didn't talk about the mechanics of appellate bond posting, and normally we're better about legal mechanics. Maybe we'll get to that tomorrow. I don't know what Junior Coltrane's worried about. Are we really taking this seriously, guys? Yeah, we are. I mean, it's out there, and our job is to confront the things that confound us and try to understand them, because we want to create a community where people have a common conception of right. And that means the ability to explain things, to convey intersubjective truths, to have our ideas checked against reality, and have a sense that reality is a place where we all live. So look, we've talked our way through a brief 35 or 32.25 minutes with you. This is what we do every morning at 8 a.m. If you're new, come back, spread the word, tell us what works, what doesn't. Mike and I are moving into the era of monetization here with an aim of creating a community where it feels safe for you to talk about the things that matter. You won't be judged. You might be ridiculed, but that's just comedy, because life is comedy. None of us chose the world in which we live. We're all bit players in a larger drama, and we are summoned to respond with courage to each failing, each act of kindness, each act of love, and to be better than the small things that transform us. Again, a special shout out to a friend, 36 years of sobriety this week. You are an inspiration to us all, because what you've found is the truth, and you've held it, and you've fought through your demons. The sort of demons that we saw today consumed Ruby Franke and her counselor, Jody Hildebrand. I'll be on with Eric Huntley at noon today. I can't recall the name of his stream, but we'll try to repost it. Thanks to Eric again for hosting us last week, and thanks to him for getting us over the top on YouTube. Mike, how do people find us? How do they join the growing revolution for common sense?
Right here at Law Pod Daily, we stream primarily to YouTube, to X, and to Rumble. On Rumble, you can find us at Law and Legitimacy, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, every Monday through Friday. And if you don't catch the live streams, you can always subscribe to the podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Audible, wherever you find premium podcasts. Subscribe, give us 5 stars, leave a nice comment, maybe hashtag AMFYoYo if you're feeling generous.
AMFYoYo, that is our hashtag. And you're thinking, what does that mean? Here's how we end each day, with a heartfelt send off to you. Adios, motherfuckers. You're on your own.
See you.